Hello and welcome back to the HIPAA Insider Show, where we discuss all things HIPAA compliance and cloud technology. So we know that technology is the engine of healthcare, and today that engine runs on the cloud. But with great power comes, as always, great responsibility, and it can be confusing. So Gil, we've gathered the top 10 cloud HIPAA compliance FAQs that our team receives every single week. This is where compliance gets a bit technical, but we're here to keep it simple. Are you ready to shed some light on the topic?
Yeah, absolutely. Adam, today I've got my hoodie on and my hat. It's getting a little cold out here, but I'm ready to tackle these 10 FAQs. And I think this is a great topic you picked because just because you're hosted at some massive world-class provider doesn't mean 100% everything is HIPAA compliant. So we got a lot to talk about. I'm excited to jump into it.
All right, great. So let's dive into it. So the first question is, if I signed a BAA with a major public cloud such as AWS, Azure, or GCP, doesn't that just make me HIPAA compliant?
No, and this is a big misconception. So the big cloud providers like Amazon, Google, Azure, they are HIPAA compliant, and that's what they claim. But what that means for you when you move into their cloud, it means that their services, most of them, and they'll provide a list of the ones that are HIPAA compliant, but most of their services are. And what that means is that you are allowed to move into their cloud and configure those tools, enable them, configure them so that they are HIPAA compliant, but they're not everything is out of the box HIPAA compliant. And if you were wondering, well, how could that be? Well, part of the reason for that is because they have a lot of compliance measures. It's not just about HIPAA. They have PCI compliance, FISMA. They have lots and lots of different configurations. So they allow you as the customer to select which compliance measures you want to apply, and you got to turn them on and configure them.
Okay, so yeah, you mentioned that the responsibility there lies on you to configure them. What exactly is a shared responsibility model? Is our second question. So, what's a shared responsibility model, and what is our job? What is our job versus the cloud provider's job? And I think obviously this is them asking.
Yeah, so let's look at it in layers, Adam. So the big cloud providers, essentially, they're providing the compliant environment, and that environment means the data center itself, the building, the access code, the guards to walk in there. You can't just wander around in there. You have to have security clearance, and you have to have the equipment and the fiber optics, and they have all of this stuff, a lot of hardware, billions of dollars, and all of that has been tuned and configured with the physical controls that HIPAA requires. So they're in charge of the physical controls, and that's primarily what they're focused on. And that's important because that's part of HIPAA compliance. So you can kind of check that box off and say, well, from a physical point of view, they got it covered. But then you as a customer, you move in and, you got your application, right? Your web app, whatever the web app does. And so you have a lot of responsibility to make sure your web app is properly configured to meet HIPAA compliance. That includes some operating system level information that you have to configure. In the case of HIPAA Vault, we do that for our customers, encryption, identity and access management. All of those great tools are available, and they have to be configured so that it does meet the HIPAA compliance guidelines.
Okay, so that web application, presumably in this context, it's going to be hosting some protected health information, which would be classed as electronic protected health information. The third question is hosting electronic protected health information, ePHI, in the cloud inherently more secure than keeping it on our local server?
This is a really important question. I've been asked this question a lot, and I want to go back because it'll make more sense, Adam, if we step back like 10 years ago. So 10 years ago when the cloud, approximately 10 years ago, the cloud was really getting started and becoming popular anyway. And before that, people had what they call server closets, right? Even small offices had what they call a server closet, and You open the closet, and what do you see? A whole bunch of servers, computers stacked one on top of the other with some fans blowing, and that was the server closet. And people were intimidated. They're like, "Well, I don't want to move my information into the cloud. I got my server closet. It's right next to my desk. I feel better that here it is, secure, and it's in my own office." So that was at the beginning of time. Now people have gotten used to not having that server closet anymore. And if you really think hard about it, and just dwell on it a little bit, you'll realize that really never was that safe, right? That building didn't have a 24/7 guard. Anyone can throw a brick through the window and just, unlock the door and walk in and grab your servers and walk out. I mean, it really never was that secure. You didn't have access controls and key cards and all of that stuff. But even if you were in a building that did, say you were a bigger company, had some fancy mirrored building that had guards, still your equipment you had sitting in that fancy building of yours still was just equipment that you bought 2 or 3 years ago. In another couple of years, it's outdated. You're way far behind the security. And being in the cloud, these guys spend billions of dollars, billions, and they're keeping up with it. So their equipment is going to far outpace yours. You cannot keep up with them. They're going to have the latest and greatest security gadgets and wizardry, and you would never be able to keep up. So now we realize that after 10 years, that it's quite the misconception that having your own equipment in your own closet in your office is better. It's actually far less. Now, having said that, there are a few cases where people do have advanced degrees in security, and maybe they have just one or two servers, and they really follow all the guidelines. Yeah, maybe in that case it could be an exception, but that would be far infrequent and far in between to have that kind of setup like that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And certainly not when it comes to large scale enterprises. The fourth question is encryption really mandatory for ePHI when we use a HIPAA compliant cloud?
Yeah, effectively it is. So technically encryption is an addressable safeguard, but for ePHI, it's considered necessary. We insist in two types of encryption. One is encryption in transit. That's using TLS, transport layer security for data moving over the network, and then encryption at rest. That means when you power off your virtual machine in the powered off state, the virtual drive is also encrypted. And furthermore, if a breach occurs, the HHS breach notification rule may not apply to data that was unusable, unreadable, or undecipherable. So if you have your virtual machine encrypted and someone makes a copy of your virtual disk, you're fine, thankfully, right? HHS says you're good to go. You protected the data. The thief that took your virtual drive, he can't do anything with that.
Okay. The fifth question now, we're almost halfway through them. So the fifth question is, do we have to restrict our ePHI storage to servers only located in the United States?
Okay, well, that's a really, really good question. I do get that question asked. Why do they ask that question? Well, we have customers that have global offices, or they're just located in another country, or maybe they have a U.S. office, but their tech team is in India or somewhere else. So they ask, hey, can we put our data, somewhere else? Maybe it's cheaper for them. Although the HIPAA regulations don't stipulate that you have your data in the U.S., it's highly, highly discouraged by the HHS. Any organization doing so must conduct an extremely thorough security analysis to account for the additional risks of foreign legal jurisdiction. So if you think about it this way, to keep it very simple and down to earth, let's say you did have your data in a foreign country. Let's say you had in India, because you have an Indian developer and they told you, hey, it's cheaper, we'll keep it here. And let's say that in that country, one of the employees does something that's naughty. They make a copy of your data, they want to post it on the internet, they do something naughty, and then you say to yourself, well, I'm going to go after those guys, like you would in the US. Well, guess what? You can't, because they're in another country. You're not going to be able to go after them. So it's not wise to do that. Now, if you're a very large organization and you have offices in every country in the world and you have attorneys everywhere, maybe that's an exception, but 99% of our customers are US based. They don't have offices all over the world. So you have to be really careful that you want it to be in your own jurisdiction here in the US, where you do have legal measures to go after a situation that maybe it's gotten out of hand.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. Number 6, we found a vendor that says they are HIPAA certified. Should we trust them?
Yeah, that's a question that I think we have to talk about a little bit, and again go into the background, little historical discussion. Otherwise, it doesn't make any sense. So the short answer: there is no government sanctioned certification. Remember, certifications come usually from a governing body of some kind of agency or something like that, and there is no governing body that has issued an official certification. But many years ago, there were a couple of companies that came along. One of them was Compliancy Group. Another one is High Trust. There might even be a third one now that said, "Hey, we'll stand up here and issue certifications for a fee." And it became a good business model for them, right? They got popular, and everyone said, "Hey, I'm going to get certified by these guys." Now, there's nothing wrong with that. Okay, don't get me wrong. I'm not discouraging anyone from doing it. In fact, it's a good thing. You should consider getting certified because they put you through the rigors of security surveys and they check on things, etc. So it's a good practice, but just know what you're buying, right? You're getting a certificate, but it's not government sanctioned. It's just a commercial company that has decided that they're going to be in that business of issuing certifications for HIPAA compliance.
Okay, that makes sense. Question number 7 about breaches. What is the single most common cause of a HIPAA breach when a covered entity, so a healthcare provider or insurance provider, or a business associate uses the cloud? What's the single most common cause of a HIPAA breach?
Let's see. I don't know if this is absolutely the most common, but it's certainly a common one, and that is to either misconfigure a firewall or a security device or under-configure it. So misconfiguration makes, you made a mistake. You thought you were doing one thing, but you configured it incorrectly. Under-configuring it means you know how it is. You buy something for your house, some electronic device, you take it out of the box, you don't bother reading the instructions, you just power it on and it just starts working and you're happy. But in security world, if you leave all the default settings, you don't bother to go through all the settings and figure out how to configure them for security, then those settings are under configured, right? You haven't enabled the device to maximize the security, or at least have the security level that you need. So that's one area. Another one is identity and access management. The cloud is secure, but you really need to think about the access levels granted. So for example, let's say you have a new employee and you say, "Hey, I want them to access my cloud project." And you give them ownership. You say, "Okay, you're the owner, just like me. I have ownership. I'm the owner manager, and I also gave them owner rights." Well, that's overkill, right? They're a technician, maybe a programmer. They don't need that level. You give them the keys to the kingdom. They have the level, they have the God level of access, and that's not really smart because now they can access things they shouldn't really be looking at, like maybe ePHI data. So I think the identity and access management would be a close second to the most common area that's the cause for breaches.
Okay, yeah, that's comprehensive. I think I agree. FAQ number 8 is: we use a paid third-party app, but it's hosted in our cloud environment. Do we need a BAA with them, even if they only touch data we host?
Let me make sure I understand this one, Adam. So let's say you have a web app and you've paid a third party for a plugin, or what kind of a third party?
I think the way that the question is framed, I'm gonna assume that they mean they're using an application but hosting it on premise themselves.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So anytime you're using a third party and you're going to be allowing them to handle your data. It could just be the data flowing through their system, or through their widget, right? So you're saying, well, they're not actually doing anything; it's just flowing through their widget. Um, and those kind of providers, they're enablers, or I forgot the other term that we use for them, but they're basically data handlers, and they're doing something to the data, augmenting it, protecting it. And anytime you have an entity like that, a third party, you need to sign a BAA, a business associate agreement with them, so that they are now connected to you legally as well, that they realize, okay, there's some HIPAA data that's being transferred through their app or through the third party service, and you want to make sure that they have that BAA in place so that you can hold them accountable for whatever work you've hired them to do, or whatever that third party app is. You want to hold them accountable, and that's the first step in holding them accountable, I think.
Okay, yeah, that's clear. Question number 9, almost coming to the end now. By the way, if you like the questions and answers, and you want more, feel free to drop us a comment, ask us some questions, and we'll be happy to review them. And while you're at it, give us a like and a subscribe. So question number 9, if we're moving to the cloud, what is one technical control we must prioritize immediately?
What's something really common that I see, Adam? It's very common that I'll see a new app, or someone who's newly moved into a secure environment, and their app has the ability to have the multi-factor authentication, that code that goes to um, via SMS, via a text or via email, or even using a third-party app like Authy or Google Authenticator, and they don't bother to enable that. So that means that it's easier to hack their app, right? You only need a username and password. So to me, that's a very, very common thing, and I'm not sure why it hasn't been enabled. In one case, I did hear from a customer that said they didn't want to enable that because they thought that extra step was a hassle for their customers, and they didn't want to discourage customers. And I kind of agreed. Actually, believe it or not, I kind of agreed with them, 10 years ago. But
Yeah.
as you know, as all our audience knows, anyone who has a computer that logs into their bank account or into anything that has any level of security, Social Security, the SSA has that, Social Security Administration, they all have a third token that you're sent. And I do want to add one more thing about this, Adam, quickly, is that these tokens are not all created equal. The ones that get to you by email, probably not the best ones. If you could use a text-based one that goes to the phone, a little bit better, but the best ones are the ones that use a third,
Authenticator.
the Google Authenticator or Microsoft Authenticator or Authy. Those are better because that token is generated requires that device, right? The phone, that particular phone, and you can't really fake that. Either you have the phone or you don't. So I think that would be my answer for question number 9. Now we're down to the last one.
Yeah, okay. Well, we'll try and make it a good one. So the last one is about backup and recovery. When we move our data to the cloud, does our old backup and recovery plan still work?
Yeah, if you're moving from the cloud or to the cloud, let's say, and let's say you were in the older style, server closet, and you said, "Hey, let's move to the cloud," then yeah, the backups are super important, Adam. And yes, your strategic plan, like you had in your own server closet in your own corporation, where you had daily backups, that certainly still applies 100% to the cloud. However, in the cloud, it's usually handled by a utility that you have to enable for backups, and a lot of it's snapshot based. So you can configure a snapshot policy that will say run 4 times a day if you want to back up every 6 hours, and it creates a snapshot of your virtual machines. But that is something that you're responsible for configuring, that snapshot policy. You have to go in there and set it up. If you don't set it up, then guess what? You don't have any backups. And then one more comment I want to make on that, because somebody out there in our audience that's listening that's highly technical might cringe and say, "Oh, I can't believe Gil just said, when you asked a question about backups, he said the word snapshots.
Mm.
Why do they cringe? A highly technical person, because they realize that snapshots do not equal backups. And technically they're correct, because backups are usually configured so that the data is 100%, I'm
Copy.
not going to say secure, but 100% with integrity. Whereas a snapshot is something that's very, very important and very useful, but it just takes a snapshot of your disk. So that's the same thing as if let's say you took your computer and you just unplugged it from the wall. And then whatever's happening in RAM is gone, and whatever you have there on your drive is there. So the snapshot has that, what they call a crash, crash consistent backup. Sounds like a weird name, crash consistent. It just means that your backup that you took at that moment in time is the same as you would get if you took a picture of your hard drive and then you just yanked the power cord out of your wall, right? That's not a great way to do it. First, you want to power off your machine, let it power off, and then take the backup. So anyway, maybe I made this too long, this 10th one, but you wanted it to be a good one, Adam. And
No, absolutely.
And I did want to end with that one. So even though backups don't equal snapshots, snapshots are extremely convenient, and you could take an hour. And so even if, let's say, one snapshot is bad because it's crash consistent, that's okay. You throw it away and you grab the next one, you'll probably be good. So I wanted to end with that because it is a very, very, very important question to make sure you have a backup policy and a snapshot policy. And by the way, last thing is you can do both of them, right? You can say, I want backups and I want snapshots.
Yeah.
Snapshots are fast, easy to use. Backups can be a pain, much harder to implement and much slower. So maybe you want both.
Great. Yeah. Both is definitely better. Well, that was fantastic, Gil. A clear and concise roadmap for navigating cloud compliance and HIPAA. So the message is clear. The cloud provides the capabilities, but the responsibility to configure and manage it is for the organization to keep track of.
Excellent. Enjoyed it today, Adam.
Yeah, and thank you very much, Gil, and thank you everyone for watching and listening. And until next time, thanks for stopping by.